All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking in this video at the New England and the Middle Colonies. This will be Unit 2, the Colonial America Unit, and we're looking at sections 5 and 6, New England and the Middle Colonies. And we look at my handy dandy map, we can see there are 4 colonies in what we call New England. Again, they're not real original with their names. You can see New Hampshire here, you can see Massachusetts, and of course Connecticut and little bitty Rhode Island. Maine is not a colony, it's not a state, it is actually part of Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is actually a very large colony. And these 4 colonies make up New England. And the people who are going to come here are going to settle in very small, very dense communities. And what I mean by that is they're going to be in small towns of a couple hundred people. They're going to be living pretty close together. They are going to have farms, but the problem is the farmland is going to be pretty poor. New England families are going to tend to be very large, somewhere between 7 to 10 or 12 children, perhaps, maybe more. This is going to promote a lot of stability, a lot of families, men, women, children, and so you're going to have a lot of stable home life situations going on here. As I said, the farmland is going to be actually pretty poor. The soil is thin, it's sandy or rocky. It's not very good for producing large amounts of crops. So instead what we have are the people of New England being subsistence farmers. That is, they grow enough food for they themselves to live. They're not growing enough to sell the surplus to make a profit. They're going to make a living by engaging in home-based businesses, maybe making furniture out of timber, or perhaps the women are going to be weavers and make cloth. They're going to turn to the ocean for a lot of their goods, a lot of fishing, because there are a lot of ports in New England, a lot of whale oil, so they're going to be out hunting whales. It's going to be very profitable. Or they're going to turn to the woods and harvest the timber, and that timber is going to be worth a lot of money back in England. And by far, the New England colonies are the most religious of the colonies. And that's what we're going to look at in the next few minutes. We're going to highlight the colony of Massachusetts because we have 2 religious groups who are going to settle there. And pretty much what we say about Massachusetts can be taken with Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire as well. I do want to be very clear, though. Although it's religious, and we often think about people coming to America for religious freedom, that's certainly the case here. They want religious freedom, but it's not about religious tolerance. Unless you are what they are, they don't want you there. So there's a lot of double standard in the New England colonies. And so here we're going to talk about the Puritans and the Separatists. The Puritans and the Separatists. Both of them believe that the Church of England, or the Anglican Church as it's called, had too much influence of the Catholic Church. What had happened back in the 1500s is King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church and established his own church, the Church of England. And they kept a lot of the same rituals, a lot of the same prayers, a lot of the same methods of worship that they had used as Catholics. Well, here it is 100 years later, and there's some new ideas. The Puritans want to purify the Church of England. They don't necessarily want to break away, but what they want to do is purify the Church of England. They want to get rid of all those Catholic influences. The Separatists, on the other hand, say, you know what, we like the ideas of the Church of England, but it's just, you can't reform it. There's not enough there to change it and still have anything left. We're going to want to break away. We want to separate completely from the Church of England. That's where that separatist word comes from. So they both are coming for religious reasons, but for a little bit different religious reason. So first, we're going to look at a separatist group known as the Pilgrims, and they're going to settle in what is now Plymouth, Massachusetts. And the Pilgrims The name pilgrim actually means a person who takes a religious journey to a sacred place. And so a lot of people can be pilgrims. You can be a pilgrim if you journey as a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim to Jerusalem, to the Holy Land. You can be a pilgrim. In this case of the Pilgrims of Plymouth, Massachusetts, here in America, we're talking about people who thought they were making a religious journey out of England to America, to a new promised land. And so they really were looking to start something new here. They actually got blown off course. They were supposed to wind up in Virginia. They wound up in Massachusetts instead. That's a navigation error of about 450 miles. But they said, you know what? Oh, well, it's God's will. This is what should happen. And before they got off their ship, the Mayflower, they signed what's called the Mayflower Compact or the Mayflower Agreement. And very simply, the Mayflower Compact is a blueprint or a foundation for orderly representative government. It's really based on the idea of, and this is the important piece, consent of the governed. Consent of the governed. That means you can't make laws without the permission of the people. You can't make laws without the people having a voice. And so if you think back to when we talked about Jamestown and the House of Burgess, that was a really important piece, a representative government. And I told you this was kind of a foundation stone of America, is this idea of people having a political voice. So here it is again, some almost 15 years later, in a totally different place. And these pilgrims are coming up with that same idea, the consent of the governed, another big piece in the American political idea. So even though this was 400 and some odd years ago, these are ideas that are being laid down well before the American Revolution, before our modern time, when we talk about have a voice in your political system. And of course, we also know the Pilgrims from the other story. This is the one you learned in grade school the most, about the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving. Guys, the Pilgrims were not prepared for life in Massachusetts. They found it very hard. They only survived because of the intervention of local native people who taught them how to hunt, who taught them how to fish, who taught them how to farm. And so after a year of surviving, they followed a native tradition of giving thanks for everything they had been given during the year. And this is, of course, Thanksgiving. Now, to bust one of your childhood bubbles here, they probably didn't eat turkey. In fact, if you look at this very romanticized picture, you look in the background, that's the ocean. I don't see a lot of turkeys running around next to the ocean usually. So instead, they're going to turn to the ocean for food. There are going to be a lot of fish. There's going to be a lot of clams. In fact, you see right below the dog there, right at the bottom of the screen, a lot of clam shells. They're going to be eating crawfish. They're going to be eating crab meat. They're going to be eating live, or not eating live, but eating eels that they're going to find in the brackish waters. Eels are going to be a big part of their diet. Yes, they probably had some venison or deer meat to go with that, but predominantly most of the food they have is going to be based on the ocean. So that kind of wraps up the Pilgrims really quick. Now we're going to turn our attention to the Puritans. And remember, these are the ones who want to purify the Church of England. They are going to leave behind England in 1629, and they're doing it to get away from the persecution. They've been arrested, they've been jailed, they've been tortured, they've been executed for their religious beliefs. And finally, the king is kind of tired of dealing with the Puritans. And he's like, you know what, just get out. I don't even want you here. You're causing trouble. You're undermining my authority. Here's some land. Go take it. I don't want you anymore. Go be productive and send me wealth back, but I don't want you in England anymore. So the Puritans really want to build a community that they believe is going to be an ideal version of what a Christian society should be. They are going to elect a governor and here it is again, guys, a representative assembly. So here's the third time it's popped up: a representative assembly. People have a voice in their government. But notice who can be elected and who does the electing. Only male church members. So only people who are Puritan can elect Puritans to represent them in government. You're not a Puritan. First of all, they don't want you there. Second of all, you have no political voice. So these rights are limited, and that's what I meant about there's no religious toleration in Massachusetts. The Puritans were highly organized. They're not going to have the starving time that we've talked about when we talked about Jamestown. In fact, it's going to be a very prosperous colony. Within 13 to 15 years, there are more than 20,000 Puritans living in Massachusetts Bay. So Massachusetts is going to grow rapidly. It is going to become an economic powerhouse. It's going to be really important. But I really want to emphasize, yes, it was religious freedom, but it's religious freedom for the Puritans. It is not about anybody can come. Okay, that's a little bit different time and a different place. So if you're not Puritan, they don't want you there. So at this point, we're going to turn our attention to the middle colonies. And again, we have 4 colonies here as well. We have New York, we have Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Now, the thing with the middle colonies is it's by far the most ethnically diverse. There were people from all over Europe who lived in the middle colonies. And so this is going to make it a little bit more unique than New England, which was very, very English. And so the middle colonies are going to develop a little bit differently because of that ethnic diversity. They are also known as the breadbasket colonies. And in this case, what that means is the soil is awesome and they're able to grow a lot of grain products. Grain products like corn, wheat, barley, rye, oats. All those things are going to be very important to the people of the middle colonies, and they're going to produce a lot of them. They're going to live on family farms. Families are going to be large again, which promotes a lot of stability in the region, and they're going to be very tolerant of different religions. And so it doesn't matter if you're a Puritan or an Anglican or even a Catholic. You can go to most places in the middle colonies and be okay and be accepted. And again, I'm not going to talk about all 4 of them, but we are going to hit New York very quickly and then look at Pennsylvania a little bit more in depth as our spotlight colony for the middle colonies. So New Amsterdam, guys, is actually what New York was before it became New York. It was a colony of the Dutch. Started out as a fur trading post. And when we're talking about New Amsterdam, we're actually talking about the city on the very tip of New York, which is where New York City is today. That's what we're talking about when we say New Amsterdam. What happens is that the King of England at the time, a guy named Charles II, basically tells his brother, the Duke of York, you know what? If you want New Amsterdam, you go take it and it will be yours. You will be the proprietor of this colony. You will get the wealth. And the Duke of York thought that was a grand idea. He organizes a naval fleet, sails across the Atlantic, pulls into New Amsterdam harbor, and the Dutch governor says, hey, it's yours, take it. I don't want to fight you. And so New Amsterdam quickly becomes New York, named after the Duke of York. It's going to be a very prosperous economic center. A lot of businesses, a lot of small family farms, but it is going to be an economic center. It is also by far the most diverse colony. So if you could walk down the street of what became New York City in 1670, you might hear 10 or 15 different languages. It is an economic center with lots of different people who live there. And you flash forward to today, New York City is a very diverse city. You can hear hundreds of languages, and you are definitely in the heart of America's economic center, New York City. So something that happened 400 years ago is still having an effect. And a lot of things have changed, but yet a lot of things stay the same as well. Moving on to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is actually started by a gentleman named William Penn as a proprietary colony. Again, this means William Penn owns it. Penn was a Quaker. Quaker is a religious organization. They have a couple of different beliefs. They want to separate from the Church of England. So just like the Puritans and the Pilgrims before, the king is tired of these religious groups, and he wants them out of England, out of his hair, so to speak. William Penn goes to him and says, hey, look, you actually owe my father a debt. I'll take some land in America, and I'll take all my people, all my Quakers, and we will go to Pennsylvania, go to America. The king sees this as a bargain, and he's able to get rid of William Penn and the Quakers pretty easily. Now, the Quakers, just really quick, because most of you have never heard of them, what they believe is a little bit different than what a lot of other religious groups believed at the time. I'm going to keep it very, very simple. First of all, they believe that everyone has a direct voice to God, that you don't need priests, you don't need ministers to be the go-between between the will of God and the individual person. Quakers believe that you could do it yourself. So you can see why the King of England, who's the head of the Church of England, might dislike the Quakers. This would be undermining his and his priest's authority. The second thing the Quakers believed is that they believed in equality. No one person was better than someone else. Again, you can see why the king is going to dislike the Quakers. This is, again, saying he's kind of like everyone, and he doesn't like that. And finally, Quakers believed in pacifism. That is, no war. They are all about peace and no conflict. Now, Penn is going to name his colony Pennsylvania, which Sylvania is a Latin root that means woodlands. So Penn's, woodlands, you get the idea. And it is a proprietary colony. William Penn actually owns the colony. Now, Penn is going to do a great job of getting people to come to his colony. He is going to advertise throughout all of Europe and ask people to come. And he's going to offer free land to early settlers. Guys, that's one of the big American dreams, is owning your own land. And certainly in Europe at the time, common people typically did not own their own land. It was owned by the king or by the church. So here's an opportunity to own your own property. The second thing William Penn's going to do, can you guess what it might be? That's right. I'm going to create a representative assembly. You can have a voice in your government. So here it is, the third or fourth time we've created a representative assembly for people to have a voice in their government. That's very unique. And so this is going to be very attractive to a lot of people. And also notice who can vote and hold office. All men. Again, ladies, I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait a while. It's not men of a certain religion, though. It's all men. Speaking of religion, William Penn made Pennsylvania total religious freedom for all. And it didn't really matter if you were Quaker or Catholic or Anglican. Maybe you were Baptist or Methodist. Maybe you were even Jewish. Come to Pennsylvania, everything was going to be okay. Everything was tolerated. See what I mean about the middle colonies being much more religiously tolerant than the New England colonies. William Penn is also going to establish great relationships with the local native people. That's going to change after William Penn has died, but for the most part, a lot of peace going on in Pennsylvania. And as a result, Pennsylvania is going to become a very populated colony very, very quickly. It is going to be a large producer of grain products. And so we're really going to have a very prosperous Pennsylvania as an example of a middle colony. I think we're going to end right there. This would have been sections 5 and 6. So stay tuned for the next video, and we'll wrap up the southern colonies and the back country, as it's called.